how common are you seeing breast cancer in India as well as in Chennai?
From 40 onwards, we see a lot of breast cancer. Changes with every cycle, it changes with pregnancy, changes with breastfeeding, it changes with you when you gain weight and lose weight, it changes.
If we made the breast cancer, now we forget about the man.
They also have rudimentary breast tissue.
So, coming to expense,
health has become very expensive. All of them are higher on the BMI, obesity, many. Health is யாரும் சொல்லி தராதனால disease னு வர வச்சு அப்புறமா தான் ட்ரீட் பண்ணுவோம்.
Ultimately, we have a common goal of preventing than treating the disease.
This is a distinct group called pregnancy-associated breast cancer. Every third shop is bakeries, every second shop is biryani. And often these are lifestyle toxins.
Hello everyone. This month, October, is celebrated as Pink October to create awareness about breast cancer. Why are we so much talking about breast cancer and why are we creating awareness is because 28% of the cancers in India are contributed or due to due to this particular cancer. So when it is 28% and it's more commonly with female, I think we all need to know that this exists, and we also need to know how to prevent or how to be aware of it, so that we identify it early and get it treated. And this is totally curable. And compared to other cancers, I think this is totally, if it is identified at the right time, it is totally curable. So here on this event, I invited, and I'm privileged to invite Dr. Selvi Radhakrishna, who's a onco surgeon, particularly a breast surgeon, who's the leading, very senior person in Chennai. When I thought about breast cancer, I don't think we get any other name as a doctor. I'm a gynecologist. We don't hear about any other person other than Dr. Selvi. And I'm really, privileged to have you here, ma'am.
Thank you.
And she is trained, all her trainings are from UK. And one of the few doctors who moved from UK and other countries to India to serve people in India is one among them is Dr. Selvi. And I think you moved in 2007, Chennai, and you're also running a trust for women called Sharana Trust,
yes,
which is contributing and helping women who are after getting diagnosed about breast cancer, how to cope up their life, and to create a support system for that women. Is that right?
Yes, we also help underprivileged people. No one should suffer from for want of money. They should not lack any treatment-related facilities. So that we support, and to the extent wherever possible, and then the rehabilitation we focus on, providing them artificial breast prosthesis, tying up things for them. Then after treatment, it's like what you have here, and so teaching them to be rehabilitation, mindfulness, yoga, pranayama, some lifestyle advice, and so it's done over a couple of days, and we call it Hakuna Matata. And this happens periodically, and then weekly meetings, monthly meetings, all this happens under that umbrella. And then we also do some research related activity through that project.
As you said, lifestyle, ma'am, like we are all doctors, we are allopathy people, yes, basically. But ultimately, at one point of time, we all realize lifestyle is the most important thing. I think I always keep saying, it's very true. Like initially, when we were studying, doing our MBBS and then post-graduation, everything was medicine. Everything was like, you need to remember what prescription to be given for which patient. But finally, I realized if your diet and exercise and your lifestyle is right, I don't think you will get into any of these diseases or deadly things. But I think you have also
yes. 2 decades of dealing with cancer, I think now then the root cause becomes kind of, you see more and more than in the inquiry shows that it is all boiling down to this particular reason, lifestyle. And so we've started looking at things differently now.
Yes, I think all of us, we've started, though we were totally into medicine, we look nowadays more towards lifestyle.
I think, it's medical curriculum also does not deal with, there is a definition about health by this WHO definition. other than that, we do not actually, we are very well trained to spot diseases and to, pharmacologically treat and investigate and treat. But what we are not taught is what is optimal health. And if you see even all the values, if you look at all the, if you do a Martial checkup or if you do a blood test, they'll give you a range of values. And the range will vary from 3 to 25 or 3 to 30. So how can 3 and 30 be normal? And if you look at it, 30 is kind of normalized. So in a class, if you have 5% who are excellent, 5% who are bad, and the rest like 90% who are average, the average determines what, and that it keeps getting pushed.
Remember the Osteona, sometimes even I will feel, sometimes I'll say 9 is anemia. Hemoglobin of 9 is anemia, but that patient will be totally fine, no symptoms, nothing. When I say, no, you're anemic, she will not even believe, no, doctor, I'm able to do everything. So is it these values, is it common for everyone, or there people who will have a low value and perform well?
So those are exceptions. But on the rule, it's more like sometimes, so for example, this HbA1c or blood pressure. So now 140 over 90 is normalized now. And they say, oh, your age, 140 over 90 is fine. Or for example, if you take HbA1c, 6 is okay. And if you take fasting insulin level, the range is somewhere between 3 to 28. And if you're 28, 27.4, it will not be called out. And it will be called normal. But actually, you're a pre-diabetic. Next, another 5 years later, will be a diabetic. So the range is actually very deceptive. And so we are not taught health. We are taught diseases. We are taught to investigate diseases, spot diseases, treat diseases. So this health is again, so that is why that space has been given up to a lot of people. You see now all this health and wellness space is occupied by alternate medicine people with we can't call Ayurveda non-medical. They are also medical.
Non-medical people are there.
Yeah. So the health and wellness space is completely taken away from us. And we are like, if anything, this BP and medical reports checking person.
No, only when you have a problem, then we know to treat them. We are not teaching them to be preventive.
Yes.
No, we should be focusing on preventive healthcare rather than treating the disease.
We have to redefine the normal.
Yes. I think that should happen from the curriculum, basic previous level, and I think it has to change. And how common are you seeing breast cancer in India as well as in Chennai?
So about a decade back, it used to be something like 130 to 140,000 new breast cancers every year. Now it's something close to 170,000 per year. And roughly translates to something like 1 in 18 to 1 in 20 breast cancers in 1 in 20 women or 1 in 18 women. So after in the country, the 4 metros actually they're all kind of more or less even. The Delhi being slightly more than Mumbai, Calcutta or Chennai. But the metros have a slightly higher incidence of breast cancer when compared to rural India. Although the gap is bridging now. So there's no big divide between rural and
But how common is it in Chennai?
It is, so personally, my practice is close to 350 cancers a year that I operate. And that is one person's practice. So there is like, if you can imagine a city of 1 in 18 or 1 in 20, so breast cancer is so common. I mean, it's almost like it's becoming like diabetes. Almost everybody has a survivor or somebody affected with breast cancer in their house.
Do you think like from 2007 when you came, now the incidence is increasing?
There is an increase.
There is definitely. And is there any common factor you've seen with your patients that these people share this thing commonly, that is why they have got it?
All of them are higher on the BMI, obesity, many. And the other factor is also diabetes. So they're all interlinked. So the culprit here is again lifestyle, insulin resistance, and the elephant in the room is something that we are missing.
And what is a common age group you're seeing?
from 40 onwards, we see a lot of breast cancer. Incidence of breast cancer under 40 is about 10 to 15% in our practice, particularly in India, and in our practice too, that reflects. 40 and above, as the age increases, the incidence of breast cancer increases.
In my practice, one patient I had who just delivered with me the second baby, and she was lactating. She came to me with a galactoseel basically. And the time when they're feeding, it's very common to see galactoseals, and we reassure and then send them, or we ask them to guide them with feeding techniques and all that. But suddenly this girl we did a scan and then it was not looking normal, and then we referred for a biopsy, and it came to be cancerous.
Yes.
It is very, very shocking. This is like some 10 years back.
This is a distinct group called pregnancy-associated breast cancer. This includes the lactational group as well, PABC ni சொல்லுவோம். So this, the thing is, it's very deceptive in a pregnant or a lactating breast, because the changes that happen during pregnancy and lactation actually can sort of hide the finding, mask the findings, and also people tend to take it as paal kattirku or a pre-existing fibroadenoma, like possibly a galactoseel, possibly a mastitis, and then try antibiotics, try this, try that, and reassure, and then they go. And imaging also is very challenging. It's not easy. Obviously, in that age group, you can't go and do a mammogram, and we'll do an ultrasound scan. An ultrasound scan, all the functional units of the breast, all those little milk-producing tissue, what we call as the acina tissue, the terminal ductal lobular units, all that will undergo hypertrophy and increase in number, increase in size, and all that will happen. So it becomes challenging with ultrasound also. And then on top of that, there'll be lakes of milk in the breast. Particularly, you do the scan before emptying the breast. And it can be very deceptive even on imaging. And that is why, although prognosis-wise, stage PABCs are similar to any other breast cancer of any other age group, because they tend to get missed in diagnosis. There is delay in diagnosis, and therefore the stage at presentation is higher and outcomes are poorer.
How common are you seeing this 20-year-old and 30-year-old?
So that will be very little, maybe 2 to 3%. So my youngest was a 19-year-old, and but it can happen, but very, very, very small in number.
And do you see men with breast cancer as well?
The incidence is something like 1%. For every 100 women with breast cancer, there could be one man.
If we have the breast cancer, now we forget about the man.
They also have rudimentary breast tissue. The male breast cancer is particularly associated with BRCA mutations. And so if they...
Do you think that's more familiar?
It's inherited, and they are autosomal dominant. And so BRCA 1 and 2 accounts for about 70% or 80%, I should say, of all mutation-related cancers in breast. And the others that you see are related to PALB2, DP53, check mutations, all that can... P10, there's another. So most of whatever we've seen so far, 80% of our mutations are BRCA related, and we've had one in each group. So proportionately, it fits in with the classic description given.
Is there anything you would say like predisposing factors that can cause breast cancer?
Hereditary breast ovarian cancer accounts for about 5 to 10%. So they have inherited this BRCA1 or BRCA2 gene from either the mother or the father, or it could skip a generation also sometimes, and it is autosomal dominant, and so this accounts for about 5 to 10% of all breast cancers, and then what we call as reproductive risk factors, where a woman who has early menarche, late menopause, who's not breastfed, who's not had a pregnancy.
Not married at all.
Again, the same reason, not had a pregnancy, not breastfed. And then age at first childbirth over the age of 28. All these things, they're centered around this hormone estrogen and progesterone. and related to the reproductive life, like the menstruation. And if you see, pregnancy offers protection because 10 months they don't have periods. And when you lactate, immediately when they lactate, first 4 or 5 months, they don't have periods. So that acts as a protection. You have more number of children, more periods of amenorrhea. That acts as protection. Also, more number of children, they tend to have menopause early. So, and also obesity, people attain puberty earlier, have early menarche. Obesity, their menopause later, beyond 50, so the number of cycles are more. So, these are all kind of more predisposed. So, finally, ultimately, it all comes down, even that reproductive risk factor comes down to lifestyle. So, we make lifestyle choices, and based on that, these things happen.
How about smoking and alcohol?
So, smoking and alcohol are cellular toxins. So, may not directly be toxic to breast cell, but it's toxic to many cells in the body. So, therefore, it will have its influence on the breast also. Alcohol certainly has been, and these are all kind of, vicious cycle, kind of. So smoking associated leading, will also be associated with poor lifestyle. And each one of these will be, contributory and all interlinked. And not like, I seen in isolation.
And what about taking oral contraceptives for a longer period? Is it protective?
Protective for ovarian cancer, but for breast, users are slightly more at risk. When you stop, the risk negates.
So you said like when there is a long amenorrheic period that the woman doesn't get her periods at all. So frequenta in the amenorrheic period is a protective thing.
So they're still you getting some exposure to exogenous estrogen and progesterone. No, when you're giving it, then there is withdrawal bleed, and then they don't ovulate. So that is protective for the ovary, but the breast is still exposed to. It's not endogenous; it's exogenous. So while they are using it, there's certainly slightly higher risk of getting breast cancer.
Higher risk.
But if they've stopped using it, the risk diminishes. Like with smoking, no, once you stop, the risk diminishes.
And what about this breast implants? For Naria, they're keeping this cosmetic implants.
So in the augmentation, they use these silicone implants. These are all medical grade silicone. It's safe. Somewhere like, sometimes it leaks. It causes some... the implants can get infected. Implants can get fibrosis. So to the implant, the body can form a foreign body reaction, form a capsule surrounding that implant, which may, we grade the capsule formation 1, 2, 3, 4. And over stage, it can cause so much fibrosis that it causes capsular contracture and put pressure on the implant, and in fact, change even the shape of the implant. The breast looks deformed. So those things can happen. The implant can leak. And if it leaks, then that also incites some immune response. Very rarely, one type of lymphoma is known to occur because of the implant. And then the whole implant thing was recalled off. But on the whole, implants are very widely used. Even in our country, it's actually many of these procedures are done like very selectively.
I know nobody talks about it also.
But it's very, very common, more common than what we actually think, women having implants. And like any other cosmetic procedure, nose correction, the madri. This is also very frequently done.
It's quite safe and not a predisposer for...
Not for breast cancer. So when you have an implant, detecting breast cancer sometimes can be a challenge, because when there is an implant there, any tissue that is, not... actively, you put pressure under the breast and push it up. What happens over a period? The implant is what is giving the shape and volume, and the breast gets thinned out naturally over the implant. And then when you want to screen that woman, you do a mammogram, how to position this breast and get a decent image. All these things are challenging. So there is a special view called
masks your...
It won't mask, you can still do it. But இதெல்லாம் technologically கொஞ்சம் challenging. So we have to do a special view called Eklund view to image the breast. And many people may not be able to, they're not trained to do this, or they don't know how to do this. And therefore, it becomes a challenge. And then sometimes when there is a leak, it is confusing. We have to do MRI. அந்த மாதிரி. So, but otherwise, as such, having an implant will not increase the risk of having breast cancer or, cause any major issues otherwise. But, like with any procedures, there are complications. And if there are complications, we have to face it. And the long-term results of implants also, implants pota, it's not like, you have an implant around age 20. At some point in time, there may be a need to revise because breast is not a it's not a static organ, right? It changes with every cycle. It changes with pregnancy. It changes with breastfeeding. It changes with when you gain weight and lose weight, it changes. So, அப்படி இருக்கும்போது நான் 20ல போட்ட implant நான் வந்து 40ல 50ல it has to look the same, it may not work. So, whenever somebody is having an implant, particularly at a younger age, they should be prepared to have some revision at a later date.
So, if the woman is taking at 20, 30 years, you will revise it at 60?
No, it is maybe required. It's not compulsorily that everybody, a lot of people learn. See, up on the 20, they may have some compulsion to have a implant, but when they're like, 40, 50, 60, life will, they change or they look at things differently. Many of them actually don't even like bother to do anything late or change, or they just accommodate, accept, and at least number women, that's how many we see like.
And look, I mean, talking about breast cancer, how I know self breast examination is something which everybody has to do. Is there a particular group of people you would recommend? இவங்கெல்லாம் கண்டிப்பா பண்ணியே
எல்லாருமே பண்ணணும். எல்லாருமே I tell actually that menstrual hygiene ஒரு pubertal girlக்கு எப்படி சொல்றோமோ அது மாதிரி this should be, because they should be, it's like will anybody walk out of the house without checking on how their face looks or their hair looks? We will do that, right? So அது மாதிரி ஒரு awareness about breast இருக்கணும். Should not be a paranoia. And don't keep telling them like, go look for this, look for that. That becomes like, you're going again into the disease mindset. This is a surface organ. It always perplexes me. It's not something hidden within the thoracic cavity like lungs or like a pancreas or like a kidney where you can't go put your finger and feel. This is outside. It's there for you to touch and see every day when you have a bath. No one applies their mind, and there is. And so I don't know why people come with apple-sized masses, orange-sized masses in the breast. And so what makes them, sometimes it's
what makes them ignore the change?
It's a denial, fear, அப்புறம் myths, இது வலிச்சது அதனால கேன்சர் இல்லை, வலிக்கல அதனால கேன்சர் இல்லை, இது பால் கட்டியா இருக்கும், நீர் கட்டியா இருக்கும், all sorts of explanations, and many of them actually don't even, I don't know whether they even like apply their, all of us in a hurry. Morning rat race that we live in, just kulichongulikla, I don't think, people have even the time or the bandwidth to look at all these things more carefully. So adnala, if you check every day, it becomes paranoia, and it's not also healthy. See, if I see you every day, if you've gained 4-5 kilos, I may not be able to perceive it at all.
To identify.
But if I see you 3 months later, Kavita, you've lost weight or you gained weight. So, normal, அது மாதிரி breastக்கும், if you examine every day, பைத்தியம் பிடிச்சிடும். And it is also not advisable. Once a month, post-period. Why? Because before periods, progesteronic effect, all of us tend to be a little sore and lumpy. And அப்போ போய் பார்த்தா எல்லாம் tenderness, there'll be lumpiness, nodularity, and எல்லாமே பயமுறுத்தும். So, the best time to do is soon after the periods or the week after the periods, when the breast is most hormonally kind of supple. And அப்போ when you shower with soaped hands and or lubricated, use any moisturizer or whatever, with the flat of the hand, we just start from the armpit here and just run the breast hands over the entire breast. Some people are big busted and they may not be able to feel it completely standing up. You may miss the lower part of the breast. அப்போ when you are lying down in the bed, use some moisturizer and examine once a month. And once a month hardly takes 1 minute. And when you do that, just, focus on that. அது ஒண்ணுதான். Because daily we bathe, but you're not applying our mind here. இங்கே குளிக்கும்போது we'll be thinking about, அடுத்து இந்த 3 o'clock இதை பண்ணணும், 2 o'clock இந்த பண்ணணும், இங்கே போய் அதை ஷாப் பண்ணணும், அங்கே போய் அதை பண்ணணும். So your mind is not here. So when your mind is not here, even the eyes cannot see or the fingers cannot feel. So that is where I think the application becomes important. And so that's all it needs. once a month.
Other than the self-breast examination, do you recommend any other screening methods? Like we have this thermal screening, then we have the ultrasound, then we have this. So
I generally am a little wary of. See, mammogram is the most validated test. Even ultrasound is not. Ultrasound is a more diagnostic application. If somebody has a symptom, like a lump or some symptom, then ultrasound is useful. Or if somebody is documented finding on a mammogram, you corroborate with ultrasound also. And ultrasound is useful to guide your biopsies and all that. But screening, mammogram. So mammogram, what is the stand for our country? I don't think we should recommend population-based screening for all, because we still not the disease incidence. Like in the West, it's 1 in 8. We are still somewhere in 1 in 20s, 1 in 80s. We have much bigger priorities. We're still having communicable diseases. We're still having other issues to deal with. So investing on a population-based screening for across the country is not advisable. Not only that, mammogram is a highly, there should be a lot of QA, QC. The quality assurance and quality control in terms of technology, what technology are you using to acquire the mammogram? The technologists performing it, are there uniform standards? For US, they have something called Mammography Quality Standards Act, MQSA. The technologists will be constantly monitored, and if somebody is 30% or more errors in doing a mammogram, they'll be asked to stop doing mammograms and retrain. Similarly, for people who are reporting, avangaloda reporting standards will be audited. So are you recalling more patients? Are you missing more cancers? And such. And then after you detect, you detect a small 1 centimeter groundnut size or some dots like powdery calcification which you can't feel, which you can't see on ultra. How are you going to biopsy? Do you have the technology, the stereotactic biopsy available? And then after you've diagnosed, do you have the bandwidth to localize and remove? So many challenges. And so without, so anything that any procedure, any test that you do, you should know why you're doing that test, and you should have the test report that is accurate, and then you should also know what to do with it later. In the follow-through process is not very clear with screening mammogram in our country. We can do diagnostic. When there is a problem, for diagnosis, yes, we do. But for screening, this is the problem. But however, opportunistic screening, you and I want to be proactive about my health. I want to check myself. Then I cannot deny a mammogram. Oh, no, we won't do screening. So you come to me, I say, I'm 40 plus, I want to screen myself. Well, more than welcome. Come and get it done. It's a good thing. So that case, we say after the age of 40, every 2 years. Then there is a group where we call them high-risk group. So this high-risk group are people with known mutations or people with strong family history, like more than 2 or 3 members. They have male breast cancer, they have ovarian cancer, they have many people in the family with breast cancer. So these people, they may not want to test themselves, but they can proactively come for screening. They should actually get more frequently examined sometimes. If they're known mutations, we say every 6 months. If we don't know the mutation status, but only the family history, we say every year. Otherwise, opportunistic screening where somebody is proactive about their health, then we recommend it every 2 years.
In your practice, if you identify a person early stage, what is the treatment you?
So the treatment, the way we look at these things first is one thing is to do with staging, the size of the tumor, and the nodal status and the biology of the tumor. So the early days, we used to just, as soon as we get a histopathology or diagnosis, we'll operate. Now we don't operate immediately. We do the immunohistochemistry profile. So we want to categorize them into whether they are estrogen-dependent breast cancers, whether they are HER2-positive breast cancers, whether they are triple negative, where estrogen receptor, progesterone receptor, HER2, all of them are negative. And then we also do the proliferative index. So in a given area of breast cancer tissue that you've taken, how many cells are in the proliferative stage? Measures the proliferative. It's a very subjective test, but it's still useful to guide how to manage. So all these things are done upfront. And ERPR positive, hormone-dependent patients, if they are in the early breast category, then we definitely operate first. If they are HER2 positive or triple negative, we actually send them for primary treatment, chemotherapy and immunotherapy, and then operate after about 6 cycles or 8 cycles. It depends on the age group. What surgery we choose for them when they come up for surgery, either this way, hormone positive, HER2 positive or triple negative, what surgery will do depend on the tumor size, breast size, location of the tumor within the breast. Is it on the inner side of the breast, outer side of the breast, lower or upper? And then the ptosis of the breast. People droop naturally. So that also influences how, and the sizes, as I mentioned earlier. So all these factors influence, and the patient's wish, of course. So, I might want to say, okay, this is a small lesion. I will do just a wide local excision and save your breast. The lady will be very clear. I don't want to have radiotherapy, because when you conserve the breast, they definitely have to have radiotherapy. And maybe for about 15 days. And it will cost a few lakhs of rupees. So this lady is very clear. I don't want to stay back in Chennai to get radiotherapy. I had one patient saying that I have 2 dogs at home. I can't stay in Chennai to have radiotherapy. You better finish surgery and send me home as quickly as possible. I'll have a mastectomy. So you have some real strange reasons for people opting for difference.
I think it is only majorly with Indian women. நம்ம யூட்ரஸ் நல்லா தான் இருக்கு, பரவாயில்ல, அதை கட்டி இருந்தாலும் பரவாயில்ல, வச்சுக்கோங்க யூட்ரஸ்னா கூட you better remove it. அந்த மாதிரி attitude, I think only
Now I find the trend is changing. People are wanting to preserve more and more. So much so that, even if I say mastectomy, they say, so you see that face going flat, palm mark on, and then, there's a new thing called oncoplastic surgery. So we combine some plastic surgery techniques, try and, borrow tissue from the side, back, refill it, all sorts of combinations to try and preserve her breast, or at least offer reconstruction.
So when you identify early, how much is their survival rate?
So again, like I said, early stage biology and optimal treatment. இதெல்லாம் பண்ணா the survival rate is very good.
Very good. 90%, we say 100%.
No, 100 no one says for anything. Definitely 90%.
That is a 5-year survival.
5, 10 also now we've documented.
And do they follow up with chemotherapy after?
So again, this depends on biology and the stage of the disease. So HER2 positive will always get some form of chemotherapy. Triple negatives will always definitely get chemotherapy. ER/PR positive, if they are very early disease, it's stage 1 disease, node negative disease, or even stage 2 node negative, or some select node positive patients, we can possibly consider skipping chemotherapy. So there are specific tests actually to, what is called as a recurrence score. So to these people, if you randomly give chemotherapy to all, we'll be over-treating a good 60-70% of people. Suppose you didn't give chemotherapy for all, you will be under-treating about 30% of people. So, and then how to select who should receive and who should not receive? There are some tests which tests give us a possible recurrence score. So there is one objective number. It's like it's not clouded by subjectivity. It's an objective number validated. So இதுக்கு முன்னாடி ட்ரீட் பண்ண patients who are doing well, அவங்களோட டிஷ்யூஸ்லாம் எடுத்து இந்த டெஸ்ட்டை பர்ஃபார்ம் பண்ணி வேலிடேட் பண்ணி this test works well to score and to give a more accurate value about their possibility of recurrence in future. And based on that, you drive the treatment to say whether you want chemotherapy or not chemotherapy. So that has become fairly popular. Some of these tests go out of the country to get it done. The tissue blocks should go to US. Sometimes they go to Europe. In India, can assist in or test irukku. Idu score kudukum. So somewhere for us also it is a kind of, defense thing. Rather than me taking the onus on deciding she needs chemotherapy or she doesn't need chemotherapy, this test assists us in planning whether somebody needs or not.
Somewhere I've read breast cancer is a rich man's disease.
Actually, now that bridge is getting smaller and smaller. It's because the rich and the affluence definitely, the affluent countries, the incidence is more definitely. If you look at the largest perspective,
all the affluent countries
ಜಾಸ್ತಿ. ಇಪ್ಪ see why affluent countries have more. It's again boils down to lifestyle.
Obesity, diabetes,
and hormonal milieu and all that.
Nutrition.
over nutrition தான் problem. And or the wrong nutrition. So இங்கேயும் affluent, இப்போ மெட்ரோலாம் பார்த்தீங்கன்னா slightly more affluent population இல்லையா, more educated, affluent. Rural areas it's still a little less, but that gap is getting narrower because இப்போ எந்த ஊரில் பெப்சி இல்லை, எந்த ஊரில் கோக் இல்லை, எல்லா ஊர்லேயும் எல்லாம் இருக்கு. அண்ட் டுடே அப்படி இல்லைன்னா வேற ஏதோ ஒரு கலர்ல லிக்விட் இருக்கு. இட்ஸ்
ஸ்மால் டவுன் இன் தமிழ்நாடு as a case.
ஸோ அது மாத்திரம் இல்லை, பேக்கரிஸ், every third shop is bakeries, every second shop is biryani, and all these are like lifestyle toxins. Like I said, no, there is no one above the age of 30 who are, very few are in that optimal health range. And now that is now actually nicely marginated. The very affluent can afford to be in that range because health has become very expensive.
So coming to expense, like ஒருத்தருக்கு breast cancer identify பண்ணதுக்கு அப்புறம் how much would they spend on this treatment?
So if it's only surgery, it could be something like 2 lakhs. But if it's chemotherapy plus targeted therapy, immunotherapy, it could even go up to 20 lakhs. And the radiation will be another couple of
stage of the disease,
biology stage, what they choose to have also. So if we do reconstruction, it costs a little bit more. So this is kind of a corporate kind of costing. Obviously, there are other places who do it for government hospitals do it for free. There are other places where it's heavily subsidized. But sometimes, I always wonder the cost of subsidy. If you have to wait 2 months to get treatment, and if you have to see what they might do in 2 or 3 visits with me, in some other place they have to do it over 10 visits, spending the whole day sitting there. And then they may have to travel, come, sit, stay in a place, fend for themselves for food. Accompanying persons will have to take leave, lose their job, lose their business. So the cost of subsidy is also, challenging. People, overall picture, I think it's all the same.
I think somewhere benefit of the viewers, ma'am. Is there a center where they can get it done in a cheaper, probably a trust-oriented sense?
So all of us, see, if you look at even us, we have a trust, so we help with people. Everybody to the extent, most doctors, we're all basically not only like, this is our bread and butter, we do, but there's somewhere there is like every company has a CSR thing that they do, activity. So our CSR also comes with helping somebody who cannot. And so my very good friends, MCCF group, they're again cancer surgeons and medical oncologists. They have a CanCare Trust, the CRRT Trust, which focuses on research and assisting with people, particularly with palliative care. Every center. And then there are regional cancer centers like Adyar, where there is levels of care. And so this kind of help is available with most responsible people. We wouldn't deny somebody care because they don't have money. But sometimes we also find people abusing it or misusing it. So that is where it hurts. And so we have to
identify who's the right person is a difficult thing. Even if we find it difficult. We do IVF. Sometimes they say there's no money, and we try to help them, but correctana person we are helping under no idea.
I think we just leave it to Providence. We do our bits.
And one more question is this BRCA1 and 2G. யாருக்கெல்லாம் பண்ணலாம்? It's like if my mother has, my sister has, should I definitely get it done? Or randomly kuda I can come and get the G?
So no, randomly பண்ற அளவுக்கு I think there is still no evidence. If there is strong family history, the indexed cancer person who suffered cancer should get it tested first. So adaliyum we have some criteria. For US, UK, US lalla, I think everybody gets it almost all. Every cancer gets tested. UK there are some definite guidelines. So we kind of follow somewhere in between. All triple negatives. So these are all guidelines across the... all triple negatives should get BRCA testing done. Any woman diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer should get genetic testing done. Male breast cancer should definitely get genetic testing done. People diagnosed with breast cancer younger than age 40 should get tested, genetic testing done.
And what about their siblings and
Cascade testing. Only cascade testing is done only if they are identified with a mutation. Suppose I find a 38-year-old woman, she has breast cancer. I do a pre-test counseling, test her, and she turns out to be BRCA positive, 1 positive. Then we would start talking to the rest of the family members. This is called cascade testing, and then counsel them for testing. So this is a very tough job actually. So that happens. And then people who have strong family history, like one mother had ovary, grandmother had ovarian breast cancer, aunt had, so paternal or maternal, both ways. So then if there are more than 2 or 3 members in the family, then they get tested first if it's possible, but they're all not available for testing for whatever they expired or not in town or not willing to test. Then the person querying could actually have testing done, but before testing, there is definitely a couple of sessions of pre-test counseling where they understand the odds, because testing without adequate information is like sitting on knowing that there is a bomb ticking there if they turn out to be positive. And if they turn out to be positive, a lot of things can go wrong for them, because they still know, if socially it becomes a challenge, because particularly in our country where all these arranged marriages happen, that can become a challenge. And getting a job could be a challenge, because you will be asked to give information about getting a medical insurance can become a challenge. So all these things become difficult. So without understanding what the possible consequences of testing, you should not get into it. So we have 2 sessions of pre-test counseling. Then we do a 3-generation pedigree chart. Then if they want to go through with the testing, then we send a blood sample to some ASCO CAP accredited labs, 2 or 3 companies like that in our. So we work with one. So we kind of get familiar with the reporting format. And so roughly, if you test only BRCA 1 and 2, and if, suppose the patient is tested and we identify this is the area where there is a mutation there, then for the cascade testing for the rest of the family, you don't have to go and check the whole platform. So you just go and look at that particular segment, and if that is there or not there could be sufficient for them. So that could cost somewhere between 7,000 to 8,000. But if you want to look at that entire spectrum NGS panel, it could be somewhere between 20 to 23 or 25. Depends on the lab.
And it's available in Chennai.
It is available. See, these are all centralized labs. The one that we work with.
Usual hematology lab.
No. So there are a lot of mom and pop labs which come up everywhere. So again, these are it's better to have an accredited lab, because see, the testing, there are 3 outcomes. One, you could have a pathogenic mutation where this has been identified as a reason why one has developed breast cancer, or one is likely to develop breast cancer. That is called pathogenic mutation. So, and then they clearly say there is no pathogenic mutation. And then the third possible result is there is some variation in our study, but that is of unknown significance. We don't know whether it is significant or not. And then variation, if that variation is documented across the world to a significant threshold, then it will become significant, naturally, isn't it? So if so many people are reporting that I am seeing the same variation that is associated with breast cancer, then it becomes a kind of one of the reasons. So the statistical probability. So for these variations, the lab should be responsible to put it in a library, to screen every year, and to inform the patient, inform the referring physician. So all this should be done in a standardized manner. And so that is why some accredited lab, somebody responsible there, I quit practice, then my patient should not be in the lurch. Somebody should be able to manage all these things for the patient. So that's why we have a strict, clear, we have a team working on it, and they monitor that.
In your practice, is there any particular interesting scenario which you would like to share?
every single I know everything. It's interesting, but particularly when you so this girl, because I just saw her recently, she's in touch with me. She was in her early 20s and she had one child. Child was about 2.5 years that time, and she had just moved into India recently, and she came with slim girl but with very large breasts. Some people are like that, very large breasts, like something like a double D or a E cup breast, and but slim lady, and she had a breast cancer, and so obviously because she was only in her 20s that time, like this is 10 years ago, breast genetic testing was not that easy. Only if somewhere you'll have to send it to Mumbai and get it done.
முன்னாடி தான் this Angelina Jolie came.
Yeah. அதுக்கப்புறம் தான் it became அதுக்கு முன்னாடி, this was something like in 2007, and so and that time NGS platform was not so it was not there. Sanger sequencing takes months to come, and 1 month 2 months ஆகும் ரிசல்ட், 2 months எல்லாம் கூட ஆயிடும் ரிசல்ட் வர. So we started off with while waiting for the result, we started off with chemotherapy and not be in a rush for surgery. So we started off with chemotherapy, and then a few months later, we got the result saying she has genetic mutation. So then we finished chemotherapy, and at that point, when we're talking about surgery, very reluctant. I was a young lady. போய் நான் வந்து அடுத்த breastலையும் there is a possibility of getting breast cancer, because there is one side which already has cancer. The risk of cancer coming in the other side is as high as 60 to 80% in BRCA1 mutation. And she's only young in her lifetime. So she can, when she's 40 or 50 or 60, any point in time it can come. So there is a question of, you deal with only this breast and the other breast you follow up over a period of time. And or you could do a risk-reducing mastectomy either now or later. So all these options are there. And then reconstruction, of course. So Appala, we were not so tuned with reconstruction also. Doing, but randomly, like, it's not like as organized as we are now. And then was very hesitantly broaching this topic to her, and she didn't give me any difficulty at all in terms of, like, I was just immediately said, "Eduthrunga doctor, rendathiyum eduthrunga doctor. Now I am very fed up with this huge breast. Now I will go and wear a reduced size. I'll go flat or have a reduced cup size." After surgery, I thought, okay, she'll be very disappointed because rendu drained and she's totally flat. She just said, "I'm 4 kilos lighter." So that's a spirit, attitude. Then she went on, and the silicone external processor. She had a great time trying to choose, I want to be this size, I want to be that size. Those processes were expensive. She couldn't, like, she said, one day I'll go B cup, one day I'll go D cup. Such a fun-loving girl. And evlo the playful akamudimo, I don't know what she went through inside. Honestly, she never showed it. But even today, when I think of her, it's only smiles and laugh and giggles and such a positive girl. And she's doing well.
Courage to do that, no? Knowing that you have a cancer in your...
she did so well. She went on to have career also, and now daughter's grown up. So everything is going well for her.
I think this is from 2007 to 24. I think it's a long time remembering her. I hope she sees this.
Yeah, I will forward it to her.
And why did you choose to become a breast onco surgeon?
Actually, I wanted to be a pediatric surgeon in the beginning. Then somewhere I thought my husband is a GI surgeon. And he was also very, very busy at that point in time. And if nanu padiya irundana, then it's difficult and solli. Then I went to UK to train. Nanga vandu I worked up in the 90s. There was no dedicated breast unit up that. It was developing into general surgeons with interest in colorectal, general surgeons with interest in vascular, general surgeons with interest in breast. It was slightly segregating. இல்லைன்னா ஜெனரல் சர்ஜன் would do everything. அப்புறம் and then there was the study from BMJ which showed that surgeons with breast as a specialty doing breast work had better outcomes than general surgeons who do அது ஒரு BMJல there was a study. அப்புறம் UKல breast started developing into a தனியா breast unit. So every district general hospital will have a breast unit and then all the breast patients should get referred there. And then others will not see. அந்த மாதிரி ஒரு இப்போ system is like that. But that took like 2 decades a decade to develop and another decade to consolidate. So now I was right at the middle there in the 90s, mid-90s. So அப்போ வந்து I used to find women, much as Western women are like more open about seeing a male doctor, and when it comes to breast, even they would feel very hesitant, and you'd see that relief on their face when you walk into the cubicle to see them. And thank God it's not, that kind of. So after that got me thinking, what about our women and even today, there is so in our clinic it's all entirely women. Only our watchman and housekeeping one person is men, of course my anesthetist. Otherwise all of us are women. And so oftentimes male surgeons, male trainees, doctors ask me, can I come for observation, can I come to... So I often, I'm find excuses not to, because patients, they feel very, you have a male walking in when you examine, there is still some reluctance, and there is still some, when people choose to come, sometimes it's because like you're all women here, and then you have those kind of issues are there. So அப்படி நம்ம ஊரில் அப்படி இருக்கும்போது, இப்போ அப்படி இருக்கும்போது, now I started it 20 years back. அப்போ இன்னும் it was, the problem was much bigger. அதனால I thought, okay, maybe I should do this, and that will actually it'll give me a niche area to work on, and also will do some good to the society. ஆரம்பிச்சது. But it was a hard climb.
So talking about the stigma around this mastectomy cancer, is it still high? That
very much. And there are people who, when finish surgery and go, and the drain ruko, and they don't want people to see the drain, it will be hidden. Lots of, I can see where they come from. It's not easy. நம்ம society, அப்படியே அங்கே பின்னாடி நின்று பேசுவாங்க, அங்கே நின்று பேசுவாங்க. I've seen people coming in, elderly people, even men, so coming and crying, நீ என்ன பாவம் பண்ணியோ தெரியல, உனக்கு இந்த வியாதியெல்லாம் வந்துருச்சு. People are cruel. And also in the pretext of advising you, consoling you, they'll come and say some cruel things.
There's an Indian tradition.
I know, அது support பண்றேன் உனக்கு வந்து
delivered women at a normal delivery C-section, they have to come and help her and be there, like in their love and affection. But இப்படி ஆயிடுச்சு உனக்கு, ஐயோ C-sectionா, ஐயோ நீ அப்படி பண்ணியிருந்துருக்கலாமே.
ஆமாம், very lot of free advice and free opinions. அப்புறம் there's also fear that contagious-ன்னு நிறைய பேர் நினைப்பாங்க. I've seen women coming and crying, நான் வந்து டாய்லெட் போயிட்டு வந்தால் ஆளை விட்டு ஃபுல்லாக வாஷ் பண்ணிவிட்டு அப்புறம் தான் யூஸ் பண்ணுறாங்க. they've kept me separately, they don't let the children come and play with me or sit with me. அந்த மாதிரி நிறைய அது கிளாரிஃபை பண்ணிட்டா நம்மளே பண்ணுறோம். பட் somewhere I think there's a lot of issues. அப்புறம் மெயினாக நம்ம ஊரில் வந்து என்னன்னா கல்யாணம். ஸோ அம்மாவுக்கு lot of prospect brides and bridegrooms, they come and ask me, இவங்க ஃபேமிலியில் வந்து breast cancer இருந்தது, அவங்க ஆண்ட்டுக்கு இருந்தது, அவங்க அம்மாவுக்கு இருந்தது, is it okay for us to அந்த பொண்ணுக்கு வந்துருமா, அப்படி இல்லாமல் கேட்பாங்க. ஸோ அதுவும் இருக்கு. ஸோ they obviously they don't want people to know. எனக்கு first thing
question is they ask me is I'm pregnant, my mother-in-law or mother is getting treated with cancer or chemotherapy-ல இருக்காங்க, can I be in the same house அப்படிலாம் கேட்பாங்க. பட்
ஸோ கீமோதெரப்பி ரேடியோதெரப்பி எல்லாம் ஒன்றும் பிரச்சனை இல்லை. ஒன்லி திங், ஒன் திங் இஸ் வென் தே டூ அ PET CT scan, they inject radioisotope. And when they do radioisotope, ஒரு 7-8 hours-க்கு they'll be கொஞ்சம் அந்த செக்ரீஷன்ஸில் அது மாத்திரம் we say. When you do a PET CT scan, if there is a pregnant woman at home or children less than 5 years at home, stay separately for one day and then it's okay. நாங்களே சொல்லிடுவோம், ஆக்சுவலி Nuclear medicine people also will say, but அது சம்டைம்ஸ் இந்த ப்ரெஷரில் எல்லாம் மறந்துடுவாங்க சொல்லலை அப்படின்னா அது ஒரு இஷ்யூ. பட் அது that is all now standard information.
So we've come to the last question of this show, ma'am. So what is the one philosophy you would like to tell our women viewers about life, our lifestyle, health?
So it's all a matter of perception. No, it's the glass half empty or half full. So if we see it as half full, then we are happy and grateful. Half empty, then there's some sense of loss. So another, I think, for any situation, there's always this half full thing that we can see. And so we should see that. So one other thing, like if I have to say, see, body is the vehicle that is given to us with so much of intricate, with all the technology, we've not been able to replicate another human being as you are. See, you can't clone, they've cloned Dolly, but, cloning,
so a human is, we should not have that.
So this body and this precious mind, this is an instrument that is given to us. So it's like the vehicle, so to achieve whatever the higher or larger purpose of life. And as we do, it's not that we are invested in the body so much, it is more in the, only if this is intact, the higher purpose can be achieved. If this is suffering, then your mind will not be going towards the higher purpose, whatever that you're seeking in life. So it's like, I know, and the analogy is having a petrol vandi and putting diesel. And the petrol vandi will choke and die eventually. Similarly, in the body, what it needs in the form of right fuel, right nutrition, right everything, the amount of the servicing is equivalent to exercise, and the petrol is equivalent, the oil is equivalent to something. அது மாதிரி அதெல்லாம் கரெக்டாக போடணும் at the appropriate time, So that is something, we just abuse it and then expect it to, and then we say, எனக்கு அசிடிட்டி இருக்கு, இது இருக்கு, ஐபிடி இருக்கு, எனக்கு ப்ளோட்டிங் இருக்கு, எனக்கு இது ஒத்துக்காது, எனக்கு அது ஒத்துக்காது. அதெல்லாம் ஒத்துக்காததுக்கு முன்னாடி எப்படி இருந்தீங்க, அந்த why did it ஒத்துக்காம போச்சு. ஸோ it's not a fault. Unfortunately, like we said, இந்த ஹெல்த்துங்கிறது யாரும் சொல்லித்தராதுனால டிசீஸ்ன்னு வர வச்சு அப்புறமா தான் ட்ரீட் பண்ணுறோம். ஸோ அந்த ஹெல்த் ஸ்பேஸை we have to now, educate and redefine our lives and go and, step back a bit and focus. Because there's no point in running and spoiling our body and mind at that age when you should nurture it and then spend all whatever you ran and earned.
I think I was just talking about globalization and followed by all this disadvantage we are seeing in health.
Yeah.
Globalization in terms of consumerism, food.
Yes.
It becomes like, what the Western people ate, we are also eating, which is not right.
We need the globalization, but with our traditional wisdom.
Yes. Thank you so much, ma'am. I think it was very nice talking to you. I think ultimately we have a common goal of preventing than treating the disease. And thank you so much for spending this time in spite of your busy schedule. Thank you.
Thank you.